The young woman, clearly a pilot, clutched her phone, her voice laced with unmistakable frustration. "There's a young black gentleman causing a disturbance in the pilot's lounge. Get yourselves over here immediately." With a sharp turn, she faced the boy, her tone dismissive. "Leave. This space isn't for you." Captain Rebecca Whitman's gaze was fixed on Elijah Jackson, a 16-year-old who nervously presented his visitor identification. "I'm simply awaiting my designated escort," he explained, "and I was informed I could remain here." Whitman cut him off, her words abrupt. "I don't care what anyone told you. Security, report to the pilot's lounge at once. We have an unauthorized individual present." Elijah froze, a wave of apprehension washing over him. He had merely been sitting, watching television, waiting. Was that an offense? Elijah, a bright-eyed 16-year-old with a keen mind, offered a small, hesitant smile as he looked at the special identification badge clipped to his shirt. This was a pass he had earned, triumphing over hundreds of other applicants, a testament to his profound passion for aviation, expressed in a heartfelt essay. From his earliest childhood, Elijah could distinguish various aircraft by their engine sounds alone. He could meticulously sketch the intricate control systems of modern airplanes, and often spent hours gazing out his window, captivated by the aerial paths traced by planes across the sky. Now, standing in this exclusive area, a space reserved for seasoned aviators, his heart pounded with a blend of elation and unease. Elijah settled back into his seat, his attention fully absorbed by the documentary on commercial aviation history playing on the screen, utterly unaware of his surroundings. The sudden, forceful opening of the door startled him, jolting him from his engrossed state. A woman stood framed in the entrance, clad in a crisp pilot's uniform. The 4 gleaming gold stripes on her shoulders signified her rank and extensive experience. It was Captain Rebecca Whitman, a seasoned pilot with over 2 decades of service at Horizon Airlines. Elijah immediately registered the mixture of surprise and suspicion in her eyes as she stepped inside. Captain Whitman's brow furrowed as she advanced purposefully toward Elijah, each stride cutting through the air like an icy blade. Her voice, sharp and piercing, made Elijah flinch. "Who are you? Who allowed you entry? What are you doing in the pilot's lounge?" Elijah instinctively rose, his heart hammering against his ribs, striving to maintain a calm and respectful demeanor as he elaborated. "Good day, ma'am. I am Elijah Jackson. I'm participating in Horizon Airline's Career Exploration Initiative. I'm just expecting my escort." Whitman offered a wry smile, her eyes conveying only disdain and doubt. "Career exploration? This is hardly a place for leisure, especially not for someone who doesn't belong here. Vacate the premises immediately." Her pronouncement struck him like a physical blow, leaving Elijah momentarily stunned. Awkwardly, he raised a hand, gesturing toward his identification badge. But, ma'am, I was permitted to wait here. I have an official ID and Miss Reynolds from Human Resources." Before Elijah could complete his explanation, Captain Whitman swiftly snatched the badge from his neck, the strap snapping with a sharp report. She flipped the badge over, glancing at it briefly before exclaiming furiously, "A counterfeit! I knew it. A youngster like you has no right to be in this restricted zone. This constitutes a significant security infringement." Elijah's face lost all color, his shock and terror mounting at the harsh accusation. He hadn't even begun to process it when Whitman reached for her radio. "Airport security," she stated coldly. "I require immediate assistance in the pilot's lounge. We have an intruder in a restricted area, likely possessing forged credentials. This is a serious matter." Elijah's heart constricted, his entire body trembling. Curious glances from individuals outside the lounge began to accumulate. Captain Whitman's unfounded yet resolute accusation was transforming what should have been a pivotal day in Elijah's young life into a harrowing ordeal, solely due to his complexion, a result of the ingrained prejudice of a single adult. Elijah's lifelong aspiration now teetered precariously, and the promising future he had so diligently strived for risked imminent devastation. Elijah remained rooted to the spot, his eyes reddening as he fought with all his might to suppress his tears. He understood that the true adversity had only just begun. The crackling static from Captain Whitman's radio shattered the quiet of the break room, immediately drawing the attention of surrounding airport personnel. Elijah stood motionless, acutely aware of every gaze slowly shifting towards him, each stare like a pinprick against his self-worth. Summoning his remaining courage, he stepped forward, his voice quivering with a mixture of bewilderment and apprehension. "Ma'am, I did not use a forged ID. Miss Reynolds from the Human Resources Department personally escorted me here. I have been waiting for nearly 20 minutes and have committed no wrongdoing." However, Captain Whitman utterly disregarded Elijah's words, her gaze as cold as ice, completely unmoved by the evident panic etched on his face. She gripped the identification badge tightly in her hand, raising it as if it were crucial evidence of a serious crime she had just uncovered, and then turned towards the doorway. Elevating her voice to address the assembling airport staff and pilots, she declared, "Attention, everyone. We are continuously trained to identify and neutralize security threats. This is a prime example. A young man utilizing a forged identification to infiltrate the pilot-exclusive area, potentially seeking sensitive data or intending to compromise airline property." Murmurs spread through the crowd, and some individuals began to regard Elijah with suspicion and outright disdain. The overwhelming feeling of isolation descended upon him, his heart pounding with a potent mix of anger and helplessness at the injustice he was enduring. Elijah scanned the room, desperately hoping to spot Miss Reynolds or anyone who could attest to his innocence, but no one stepped forward. At that precise moment, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from down the corridor. 2 airport security officers entered, their expressions grim, and quickly approached Elijah, following Captain Whitman's directive. She pointed directly at Elijah, her tone firm and unwavering. "That's him. I want you two to escort him out and conduct a thorough search. I am certain this represents an intentional breach of security." One of the officers, a middle-aged man with a stern countenance. The official's stern expression surveyed Elijah from head to toe before he spoke in a controlled yet authoritative tone. "Young man, please accompany us. We need to confirm your identity and clarify the circumstances." Elijah instinctively drew back, his voice faltering with apprehension, yet he fought to maintain his composure and reason. "I was supposed to be here. I'm part of the Aviation Experience program. You can contact Miss Reynolds. I'm not lying." Captain Whitman, however, interjected once more, ruthlessly extinguishing Elijah's dwindling hope. Her sharp gaze conveyed no sympathy nor any wavering in her conviction. "I have no more time to waste. He has trespassed in a restricted zone, presented a fraudulent identification, and offered unconvincing excuses. This requires immediate attention. This is a matter of flight safety. It cannot be treated lightly." Her pronouncement felt like a death sentence, plunging Elijah into a state of sheer panic. The world around him seemed to blur uncontrollably. Beads of sweat formed on his brow as the full gravity of this unfolding nightmare began to sink in. The blatant injustice was undeniable, yet he was powerless to contest or alter it. As the two security officers moved closer, Elijah, with trembling hands, retrieved his phone. His voice cracked as he pleaded, "Please, may I call my father? He can explain everything." Whitman scoffed, crossing her arms with a sneer. She spoke in a mocking tone, conveying a disdain so potent that only Elijah could fully perceive its crushing weight. "Go ahead, make your call. Though I doubt your father will be of any assistance in this situation, I will ensure your parents, likely toiling as janitors here, are dismissed for allowing their son to cause trouble at this airport." The room fell into an oppressive silence, broken only by the palpable cruelty and overt prejudice in her words. Yet, no one dared to speak up for Elijah. He stood frozen, his eyes welling with unshed tears, his hands quivering as he dialed his father's number. Each prolonged ring echoed in the stillness, each passing second stretching into an eternity, amplifying the tension and tragedy of that moment. Elijah could only cling to the hope that his father would arrive in time to rescue him from the abyss of this cruel injustice. The phone's ringing seemed endless, each chime tightening the knot of anxiety in Elijah's chest. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, a nervous vigil for the sound of his father's familiar voice. But at that very moment, as reality deepened into a darkness more profound than ever, cherished memories from the past surged forward, gently soothing the ache tearing at his heart. Elijah vividly recalled the first time he had ever set foot on an airplane. It was his 6th birthday, and his father, David Jackson, had recently secured a significant position at the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. To commemorate his son's birthday, he had secretly arranged a special tour at Dulles International Airport near Washington, D.C. In that memory, Elijah was a small boy with bright, wide eyes, standing beneath the immense wing of a colossal Boeing 777, watching the aircraft ascend into the sky like a powerful, majestic iron bird. He remembered the sensation that moment, a mixture of awe and elation, coupled with a deep-seated yearning to conquer the vast expanse of the skies. Following that extraordinary tour, Elijah incessantly pestered his father with questions about every aspect of aviation. He became captivated by the mechanics of how these immense aircraft gracefully navigated the sky, the fundamental principles of aerodynamics, and the skill of pilots in safely guiding planes through even the most turbulent weather. Despite his demanding schedule overseeing flight safety nationwide, David always made time to sit with his son, patiently elaborating on every detail. In every conversation, he would consistently convey one crucial message to Elijah. He could become a great pilot if he possessed enough bravery and unwavering persistence. In the ensuing months, Elijah's bedroom transformed into a sanctuary of airplane models of all sizes, from classic aircraft like the Wright Flyer to the most cutting-edge machines in the world, such as the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and the Airbus A350. The walls of his room soon became adorned with posters of aircraft, intricate engine schematics, and historical facts about the aviation industry. His father once remarked with a smile that his room resembled a miniature aviation museum. Beyond mere passion, Elijah also actively pursued his dream of becoming a pilot through rigorous training. He frequently utilized flight simulator software, diligently practicing fundamental flying maneuvers, mastering takeoffs and landings, and gradually progressing to managing simulated emergency scenarios. On numerous occasions, his mother had to gently remind Elijah to retire for the night, as he would often stay up late honing his flying skills on the computer. David, conversely, silently encouraged his son, understanding that each hour dedicated to practice brought Elijah one step closer to realizing his grand ambition. However, the path toward that dream was not without its obstacles. Elijah encountered skepticism from those around him, facing remarks from individuals who doubted that a young black boy could aspire to become a pilot. During those challenging moments, David would invariably appear at precisely the right time, placing a steady hand on his son's shoulder and meeting his gaze with an expression of unwavering determination. Elijah, others may doubt you, but never allow yourself to doubt who you are. You belong to the sky, and the sky will always welcome you. Those encouraging words empowered Elijah to surmount his most difficult periods. When the most significant opportunity arose, the rigorous selection process for Horizon Airline's specialized aviation experience program for exceptional students, Elijah knew he could not let it slip away. He dedicated weeks to crafting his application essay, articulating his profound passion for aviation, the unforgettable moments shared with his father, and, most importantly, his burning ambition to become a pilot. On the day the results were announced, Elijah was so consumed by nervousness that he couldn't bring himself to open the letter alone. It was David who had to encourage him and open the envelope for him. The moment his father's face broke into a bright smile, and he informed Elijah that he had triumphed over hundreds of other applicants to secure his place, Elijah's emotions overflowed, and he could no longer contain his tears. It was not merely a victory. It was a profound validation of his dream and the culmination of years of relentless dedication. Elijah embraced his father tightly, tears of immense joy streaming down his face, silently thanking him for his unwavering belief and steadfast support throughout this challenging journey. However, Elijah could never have anticipated that this day, the inaugural day of the special program, a day that should have marked a monumental turning point, would devolve into a harrowing ordeal. Captain Whitman's skepticism and prejudice felt like sharp blades, meticulously slicing away at Elijah's purest dream, piece by piece. Her words, her demeanor, everything seemed to assert that his aspirations would forever be confined by the color of his skin and his background. Elijah clenched the phone tightly, struggling to swallow the lump in his throat. He recalled his father's counsel and silently resolved to remain strong, to stand firm in defending the dream he had so diligently nurtured for years. More than ever, Elijah understood that the true battle for his aspirations had just commenced, and regardless of how dire the circumstances became, Elijah maintained his conviction that his father would arrive precisely when needed to rescue him from the darkness cast by prejudice and injustice. The beautiful recollections of his father and the dream of flight, which had momentarily soothed some of Elijah's fear, were abruptly extinguished by the powerful tread of the airport security personnel. Two men in gray uniforms swiftly entered the room, their faces etched with cold seriousness, their sharp gazes scrutinizing Elijah as if he were a genuine suspect. Elijah instinctively stepped back, a feeling of having committed some grievous offense overwhelming him, though he couldn't quite grasp the reason. One of the security officers, a tall man with a severe countenance, briefly surveyed the room before fixing his gaze firmly on Elijah. He approached with unwavering resolve, his voice clear yet laced with menace as he spoke. "Young man, you need to explain yourself immediately. How did you gain entry to this pilot's lounge?" Elijah swallowed with difficulty, attempting to regulate his rapid breathing. His eyes were wide with fear, but he still strived to maintain a semblance of calm. He took a deep breath and slowly articulated, "I am Elijah Jackson. I am part of the Career Experience Program at Horizon Airlines. Miss Tanya Reynolds from HR brought me in here, but she has stepped outside to handle an urgent matter." The security officer listened to his explanation and then turned toward Captain Whitman, seemingly seeking confirmation of Elijah's account. Instead of acknowledging or calmly reassessing the situation, Whitman subtly shook her head, shrugging with a disdainful expression. She responded with a cold, skeptical tone. "I have been employed by this airline for nearly 20 years, and it has never happened that a student could enter the pilot's lounge without supervision." "His identification appears to be fabricated. Just examine it closely, and you'll see clearly." That statement struck at the very core of everyone's trust, immediately altering the demeanor of the security team. The tall man moved nearer to Elijah, his eyes reflecting palpable doubt. "Hand over your identification and explain where you obtained this badge and who provided it to you." Elijah, with trembling hands, opened his jacket pocket, fumbling for his small wallet containing his student ID. He attempted once more to explain as clearly and sincerely as possible. "I am not lying. Miss Reynolds provided me with this badge this morning. It has my name and photograph. Please, you can contact Miss Reynolds to verify what I am saying. I harbor no ill intentions whatsoever." However, his heartfelt explanation was drowned out by the growing murmurs of doubt from the other employees and pilots who were now congregating more densely around the doorway. Their curious and skeptical glances mingled with caution, all directed at Elijah, as if their mere gaze could determine his innocence or guilt. No one stepped forward to defend him. No one uttered a word to corroborate his truthful account. Elijah painfully realized he stood utterly alone in this confrontation against prejudice. Captain Whitman, fully exploiting the psychological advantage she held, spoke again with a grave expression, deliberately emphasizing the perceived danger. "Observe carefully. This is precisely how individuals with malicious intent infiltrate sensitive areas like this. We cannot afford to be careless, especially when aviation security must always remain paramount. Who can guarantee he harbors no further dangerous plans?" Those unfounded accusations immediately ignited a stronger wave of doubt in the minds of everyone present. Some pilots began shaking their heads in irritation, their eyes seeming to blame Elijah for the ensuing disruption. Others discreetly produced their phones to capture photographs or videos, their curiosity tinged with a hint of malice. Elijah felt his heart fracturing in despair. The sheer absurdity, injustice, and prejudice generated an immense pressure that weighed heavily upon him. The tall security officer advanced another step, pushing Elijah against the corner of the wall. He extended his hand, his voice cold and unwavering, showing no mercy. "We will have to escort you from here for a more thorough examination. If you persist in refusing to cooperate, we must consider this an act of resistance against law enforcement." Elijah could clearly sense the terrifying pressure emanating from his words and actions. He realized he had fallen into a trap of doubt, a burden too immense and intense to bear. Elijah had never imagined that the pure dream he had nurtured throughout his childhood could crumble so rapidly, merely due to a prejudiced glance from a stranger. He took a deep breath, his tears threatening to spill, but he desperately fought to hold them back. In despair, Elijah glanced down at his phone once more, hoping his father would materialize just in time to extricate him from this dreadful predicament. But the phone screen remained agonizingly silent, and Elijah realized in that instant that he was utterly alone, ensnared in the most bitter web of doubt he had ever encountered in his life. Elijah's eyes desperately swept across the break room, seeking even the faintest glimmer of sympathy amidst the sea of people surrounding him. However, all he received were cold, suspicious glances, or worse, the heart-wrenching apathy of indifference from those around him. He had never felt so profoundly alone, as if all the trust and hope he had painstakingly built over the years had vanished in a mere few fleeting moments. He was cornered, his back pressed against the cold wall, his hands clenched tightly together as if desperately clinging to the last vestiges of composure he possessed. The tall security officer's gaze remained fixed on Elijah, sharp and stern, while his colleague murmured something into his radio. Captain Whitman stood nearby, arms crossed, a smug expression gracing her face. She glanced at Elijah, a look of satisfaction crossing her features as she observed his fear and panic. Whitman stepped forward deliberately, ensuring her voice echoed clearly throughout the room, making certain that everyone could hear her. "This is precisely why I always caution that we must never, ever be careless, even for a second, with airport security. He may appear harmless, but who knows what is truly transpiring within his mind? A moment of carelessness could lead to unimaginable consequences." Her words struck Elijah like a chilling blade to the heart, transforming him, in the eyes of everyone present, from a passionate student with noble aspirations into a dangerous threat. Elijah could discern the fear, concern, and even anger etched on the faces of the pilots and airport staff, the very individuals he had admired mere moments ago and aspired to emulate. Unable to endure it any longer, Elijah shakily attempted to speak once more, his voice hoarse but filled with desperation. "Please, may I call my father? I swear I have done nothing wrong. He can confirm this, please." The security man stared at him for a long moment before reluctantly nodding. Elijah quickly grasped his phone, his hands trembling so severely that he could barely dial his father's number. His heart pounded wildly, his breath coming in short, gasping bursts, and each ring of the phone only amplified his growing fear. Elijah silently prayed his father would answer immediately, but each ring seemed to stretch out, as if daring his patience to break. While waiting, Whitman continued speaking to those around her in a voice brimming with overzealous caution, deliberately sowing seeds of doubt in everyone's minds. "We have undergone specific training for situations like these. Individuals with ill intentions will always attempt to feign innocence, always employing logical explanations to conceal their true motives. I have witnessed many similar scenarios over the past 20 years. Trust me, the way he is acting is unequivocally suspicious." The onlookers began to whisper amongst themselves, their eyes once again shifting towards Elijah, now filled with more doubt and discomfort than before. They no longer perceived him as an innocent teenager, but as a genuine threat, someone to be wary of and actively avoid. Elijah had never imagined that in the blink of an eye, his entire future, one he had worked so diligently towards, could be at risk of vanishing simply due to an unfounded accusation from a complete stranger. Elijah was acutely aware of the consequences of such an event. A single moment of being considered a threat to aviation security would irrevocably close the door on his dream of becoming a pilot. Reputations, scholarships, career opportunities, all would dissipate into nothingness due to a moment of cruel prejudice. Finally, the phone ceased ringing, and his father's familiar voice boomed with strength. "Elijah, what is happening?" But hearing his father's voice only intensified Elijah's panic, his emotions overwhelming him as he struggled to articulate the words clearly. "Dad, I'm at the airport, and they're saying I illegally entered the pilot's break room. They don't believe me. I don't know what to do." There was a sudden silence on the other end, and for a brief moment Elijah felt as though his heart had stopped. After a pause, his father, David Jackson, spoke firmly and with calm resolve. "Elijah, remain calm. I am on my way. Do not move from that spot. I will personally handle this." That brief statement from his father caused Elijah to burst into tears, a mixture of relief and sheer terror from what he had just endured. Whitman observed Elijah crying and smirked mockingly, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, you had to call your parents after all, didn't you? Everyone is like that. You should have understood your place from the very beginning." The insult stung Elijah deeply, but he could do nothing but remain silent, awaiting his father's arrival to rescue him from this predicament. Never had he wished for his father's presence more desperately, for now, his dreams, which he had nurtured for so long, hung on the precipice of total annihilation, and his father was the sole individual capable of pulling him back from this nightmare. The contemptuous whispers of Captain Whitman continued to echo clearly in Elijah's ears, each cold word slicing into his heart like a sharp blade. It seemed that calling his father for assistance not only failed to improve matters, but instead amplified the suspicion and judgmental glares from the onlookers. Whitman recognized Elijah's vulnerability and wasted no opportunity to exploit it to its fullest. Whitman advanced another step into the center of the room, standing tall, her posture exuding authority and confidence, as if presiding over a public trial where she served as both the accuser and the judge. Her piercing gaze swept across everyone witnessing the unfolding scene, then settled on Elijah's face with an indescribably cold expression. She raised her voice, loud enough for everyone inside and outside the room to hear. "I hope everyone here comprehends the gravity of this situation. We cannot simply dismiss this as a minor misunderstanding. Not only did he unlawfully enter a restricted area for pilots, but he could also be an industrial spy, someone attempting to pilfer sensitive information from our airline." The room fell into near-complete silence following that grave declaration. Elijah felt an icy chill run down his spine, his eyes widening in disbelief, unable to process the absurd and cruel accusations being leveled against him. An industrial spy simply for occupying the pilot's lounge and watching a documentary on aviation? He was now being portrayed as a dangerous spy. The murmurs of the crowd spread rapidly, every gaze turning towards Elijah, filled with doubt and judgment. He could feel his honor and dignity being ruthlessly trampled upon. But Whitman did not cease. She continued, her tone dripping with sarcasm and malice. "He just called his parents. I'm guessing they must be some janitors or cleaning staff working here at the airport. Perhaps this is how they utilize their children to sneak into restricted areas. Who knows what their true intentions are?" The suppressed snickers and mocking glances began to circulate among the employees and pilots observing the unfolding situation. Elijah felt as though his heart was being crushed, his entire body trembling with anger and shame. He clenched his fists so tightly that his fingernails dug into his palms, doing everything in his power to suppress the tears threatening to spill. Throughout his life, Elijah had always taken immense pride in his father, David Jackson, a man of great respect and dignity who had dedicated nearly his entire life to ensuring the safety and advancement of the country's aviation industry. Elijah had witnessed his father working through the night to manage aviation safety crises, had observed his resolve and bravery in the face of formidable challenges, and now, right before his very eyes, his beloved father was being cruelly belittled by Whitman. The humiliation, the public degradation of his integrity almost shattered Elijah, but he remained steadfast, his eyes locked onto Whitman with a determined gaze that carried a subtle hint of unmistakable hurt. He understood that at that moment, any display of anger or weakness could be exploited by Whitman to further solidify her accusations. Whitman caught Elijah's gaze, appearing momentarily surprised by the boy's unexpected resilience. However, instead of retreating, she became even more determined to escalate the situation, as if intent on proving to everyone that she was invariably correct. Whitman raised her voice again. "Just imagine if we hadn't apprehended this boy today. How severe could the repercussions have been?" The safety of hundreds of passengers and crew members could have been jeopardized by the slightest lapse in our vigilance. Those around her began to nod in agreement, as if they wholeheartedly endorsed everything Whitman was asserting. Elijah felt his heart being torn asunder. He swallowed the pain that choked his throat, and with a trembling voice but unwavering resolve, he spoke. "Ma'am, I am not a spy, and my parents are not janitors here. Please refrain from insulting them." But Elijah's feeble protest only seemed to further gratify Whitman. She smirked coldly, her voice dripping with disdain. "Oh, I am not insulting anyone. I am merely presenting a very plausible scenario. The truth, as it happens, can be difficult to accept, can't it?" Elijah could barely remain standing, his legs shaking from indignation and humiliation, but he refused to succumb to this cruelty. Elijah understood that he had to preserve his dignity, not only for himself but also for his father, who had always instilled in him the principle that a person's worth is defined by how they confront adversity. At this juncture, all Elijah could do was stand in silent suffering, awaiting his father's arrival to extricate him from these cruel and baseless accusations. He urged himself to be strong, to endure just a little longer, for Elijah knew with absolute certainty that his father would never permit such unjust cruelty to persist. The lingering resonance of Captain Whitman's cold insults continued to reverberate in Elijah's ears, rendering his mind almost numb with profound shame and hurt. Every suspicious glance from the crowd felt like invisible threads tightening around his heart, and each breath he took was heavy and painful. Elijah struggled to remain upright, his legs threatening to buckle under the immense weight of the cruelty and prejudice that enveloped him. His hands trembled as he gripped his phone tightly, as if it were the sole lifeline remaining for him to cling to in this moment. Elijah lowered his head, attempting to take a deep breath to steady his voice as he contacted his father for the second time. His trembling fingers fumbled with the familiar numbers, each beep echoing as if it were extending the fear that was escalating within him. Finally, his father, David Jackson, answered, his voice warm yet authoritative, nearly causing Elijah to break down with relief. "Elijah, it's Dad. Are you all right?" The instant he heard that familiar voice, all the emotions Elijah had been suppressing erupted forth. His voice cracked, filled with more panic and weakness than he had anticipated. "Dad, I'm at the airport, and they're saying I trespassed into the pilot's break room. They don't believe me. I really didn't do anything wrong, but they don't believe me, Dad. Can you come here right now?" David paused for a moment, and that silence felt as though it had frozen Elijah's heart. But then his father's voice rose, strong and decisive enough to alleviate some of the fear in Elijah's chest. "Elijah, listen to me. You cannot be afraid or lose your composure any longer. I will head to the airport immediately to clear this up. Stay strong, and I will not allow anyone to disrespect you again." His father's firm and authoritative promise felt like a beacon of hope piercing through the dense darkness of despair into which Elijah was sinking. Elijah took a deep breath, wiping away a tear that threatened to fall. He knew that at this moment he had to hold on, not only for himself but also for his father, who was en route to restore his dignity and his dreams. While Elijah was still attempting to regain his composure, Whitman spoke again, seemingly intent on crushing the last shred of hope Elijah had just received. Her cold, mocking voice echoed once more, deliberately amplified so that Elijah could clearly hear. What a touching performance. I bet his father is now rushing to get away from his post in the restroom area to come here and defend the little darling's name. But unfortunately, we need to resolve this quickly. Airport security cannot wait for such theatrics. The surrounding individuals chuckled softly, their expressions mocking and in agreement with the spiteful words. Elijah felt his throat tighten. The frustration and anger were so intense that he could barely maintain his composure. Yet, he bit his lip, keeping his gaze steady and resolute as he looked directly at Whitman, refusing to let her witness his weakness again. Whitman raised an eyebrow at Elijah's gaze, clearly surprised by his sudden fortitude, but she refused to back down, having gone too far to retreat. She quickly turned to the security officers and coldly issued an order. "If his parents do not appear immediately, I suggest you escort him out of here right away. We have already wasted far too much time on this." The two security officers exchanged uncertain glances, but ultimately moved closer to Elijah, as if prepared to carry out Whitman's orders at any moment. Elijah felt every muscle in his body tense. But at that very moment, one of the security officers' phones rang. He quickly answered, and his face shifted to one of surprise and clear hesitation. He hung up, walked over to his colleague, and whispered something, causing both of them to pause and exchange a hesitant look. Whitman noticed this sudden shift and frowned in annoyance, her voice sharp with irritation. "What is happening? Is there a problem that you are hesitating like this?" The security officer hesitated, unsure how to explain. Finally, he responded in a soft tone, audible enough for everyone in the room to hear. "We have just been informed that a senior official from the FAA is on their way to handle this personally. We will need to wait a little longer." Whitman stood stunned for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. She shrugged, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "An FAA official? How interesting. I am very curious to see which FAA individual is so unburdened that they would concern themselves with a child like this." Elijah heard every mocking word clearly, but this time he no longer felt vulnerable. His heart was stronger now, fueled by his father's promise. Elijah knew that his father, David Jackson, the respected and influential man, was en route, bringing with him the last glimmer of hope that would help Elijah escape this desperate nightmare. The atmosphere in the pilot's break room was thick with suspicion and tension, akin to a ticking time bomb poised to explode at any moment. The security staff remained cautious, hesitant to act despite Captain Whitman's intense gaze urging them forward. Whitman stood there, her face betraying impatience mingled with frustration. Meanwhile, as Elijah struggled to maintain his remaining strength, trying desperately not to collapse under the immense pressure bearing down on him, just when Elijah thought he could no longer hold on, the walkie-talkie in the hand of one of the security officers crackled to life with a loud, clear sound. A firm voice cut through the tense silence, shattering the heavy air in the room. "Attention all units. A VIP group is entering the pilot's break area. Ensure the area is clear and be prepared to provide assistance." The sudden announcement caused everyone in the room to jump, heads turning towards the large door, all awaiting the arrival of the important guest. Whispers quickly spread throughout the room, a mixture of curiosity and surprise. Whitman furrowed her brow, clearly annoyed by this unexpected development that interrupted and jeopardized her plan to deal with Elijah. She moved closer to the security officer, speaking in a low yet sharp voice. "I demand that you remove this boy immediately." However, the two security officers seemed to have received a higher directive, gently shaking their heads in a silent yet significant gesture, as if to convey that the situation was beyond Whitman's control. Mere seconds later, the break room door swung open, and strong, purposeful footsteps rang out swiftly across the polished floor. Elijah lifted his head, his heart nearly bursting with emotion as he recognized the person rapidly approaching him. His father, David Jackson, the administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. Accompanying Mr. Jackson was a contingent of high-ranking FAA officials clad in sharp suits, their expressions serious and commanding. This sudden appearance immediately hushed the room, as if everyone collectively held their breath to witness what would transpire next. No one dared to speak, merely exchanging looks of shock and trepidation as they followed Jackson's every move with wide eyes. Whitman froze, her eyes wide with disbelief as she recognized the powerful man striding directly towards Elijah. Someone she had mistakenly presumed was merely an ordinary airport janitor. Her face rapidly transitioned from one of confidence to one of intense worry and shock. David Jackson walked swiftly towards Elijah, his expression a blend of concern and affection. He gently placed his hand on his son's trembling shoulder, his voice filled with authority yet incredibly warm. "Elijah, are you all right? I'm here now. Don't worry anymore." Those few words felt like a miraculous balm, bringing Elijah an immediate sense of safety and peace that he desperately needed. Elijah nodded, struggling to hold back the tears streaming down his face. He knew his father had arrived, and he would no longer be alone. Mr. Jackson tightened his grip on his son's shoulder for reassurance before turning around, his eyes hard and cold as he faced Captain Whitman. His voice was clear and authoritative, sending a shiver down everyone's spine. "I am David Jackson, Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. I have been fully briefed on the situation involving my son, Elijah Jackson, and I'm deeply appalled to learn that my son has been falsely accused right here at this airport." Whitman's face turned pale, her voice faltering and filled with embarrassment as she weakly attempted to justify herself. "Mr. Jackson, I didn't know he was your son. We were simply trying to ensure airport safety." Mr. Jackson cut her off coldly, not allowing her to elaborate further. "The safety of the airport is the highest priority for the FAA and for me personally. However, that does not grant you the right to abuse your authority, to make unfounded accusations, and to humiliate a child based on personal prejudice and bias. What you have done not only severely damages my son's dignity, but also reveals a broader issue regarding how a seasoned pilot like yourself treats the public and your colleagues." Every word from Mr. Jackson was like a powerful gust of wind sweeping through the room, dismantling the false facade Whitman had erected to conceal her wrongdoings. The others in the room now regarded Whitman with wide eyes, some displaying visible disappointment and disapproval. Whitman stood frozen, her mind in disarray under the overwhelming pressure of Mr. Jackson's sudden appearance. She could no longer speak, merely lowering her head in embarrassment and shame. Elijah stood beside his father, his heart gradually calming, a sense of profound gratitude washing over him. He realized how fragile boundary between despair and hope truly was, but now, with his father by his side, hope had triumphed, and he had regained his faith in justice and righteousness. David Jackson's arrival not only helped Elijah reclaim his dignity, but also completely shifted the balance of power, transforming the nightmare Elijah had just endured into an unexpected turning point, opening the door for the truth to be revealed before everyone present. The tense atmosphere within the pilot's lounge seemed to freeze when Mr. David Jackson's sudden appearance, accompanied by a delegation of senior FAA officials, completely altered the dynamics of the situation. However, Captain Whitman, deep in her excessive confidence and arrogance, had yet to grasp the reality unfolding before her. With her stubborn and obstinate demeanor, she continued to level accusations in an effort to support her position. "I take full responsibility for my actions. Aviation safety is no laughing matter. We cannot overlook suspicious situations like this. This boy, Whitman's words abruptly ceased as her gaze met the stern countenance of Mr. David Jackson, standing mere steps away from her. His face was cold and dignified, his eyes locked onto Whitman's as if he could perceive the very essence of her soul. In that moment, Whitman finally realized that the situation had completely spiraled beyond her control. Her expression shifted from confident to stunned, then rapidly turned pale, her eyes widening in fear as she recognized the true identity of the powerful man standing before her. The pride she had always displayed vanished instantaneously, replaced by a woman now utterly bewildered and trembling under the immense pressure of an unexpected reality. The room descended into absolute silence, a heavy and suffocating quietude far more oppressive than any sound that had preceded it. Airport staff, pilots, and security personnel stood frozen, their eyes constantly shifting between Mr. Jackson and Whitman, as if witnessing the most dramatic shift in power they had ever observed. No one dared to speak. They were all acutely aware that the balance of power had now irrevocably changed. After what felt like an eternity of silence, Mr. Jackson finally spoke, his voice low yet powerful, each word clearly enunciated. "Captain Whitman, I expect a clear and convincing explanation from you as to on what basis you concluded that Elijah posed a threat to security and what evidence led you to believe that the access card he is wearing is counterfeit." At that precise moment, Whitman appeared cornered, her confused expression more evident than ever. She glanced around as if seeking sympathy from those present, but all she received was a silence fraught with reproach. Whitman stammered, her voice hesitant as she attempted to justify her mistake. "Mr. Jackson, I truly meant no harm. I was merely performing my duty as a pilot, ensuring the safety of this restricted area. Elijah was seated alone in the pilot's lounge with a badge that I deemed suspicious. I was simply adhering to security protocols." Jackson raised an eyebrow, his expression remaining cold and stern. He took a step closer, causing Whitman to instinctively recoil. His voice rang out with even greater weight, piercing through her feeble defense. "You followed security protocols, did you? Did you properly verify Elijah's identity, or did you simply jump to conclusions based on personal bias? I reviewed the situation as soon as I was informed, and Elijah's identification was fully valid, complete with all necessary clearance for him to be present. What disappoints me greatly is that you hastily made an incorrect judgment, transforming my son into a suspect in front of so many individuals." Whitman swallowed, attempting to cling to the last vestiges of her dignity. She continued to justify herself, her voice growing weaker and more trembling. "Mr. Jackson, I genuinely did not realize he was your son. Had I known it was your son, I certainly would not have acted in such a manner." Her careless remark immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room. Everyone, including Elijah and the FAA agents accompanying Jackson, immediately grasped the profound implication of her prejudiced statement. Whitman immediately regretted her words, but once uttered, they could not be rescinded. Jackson remained still for a moment, his gaze piercing and unyielding as he fixed it on Whitman. His voice grew even more serious and sharp. "If you had known he was my son, you just stated, Captain Whitman. This clearly demonstrates that the actual issue here is not whether Elijah is dangerous, but rather your prejudice and discrimination against those whom you deem unworthy of trust simply because of their appearance. As a senior pilot for Horizon Airlines, you should possess the clearest understanding of responsibility and professional ethics. It is unacceptable that you allow your personal biases to influence your judgment and decisions in your job." Whitman lowered her head, her face pale with shame and fear. Everyone could clearly witness her collapse and confusion. Those who had previously supported or doubted Elijah now turned to look at Whitman with disappointment, surprise, and a hint of discomfort. Jackson continued, this time slowing his speech but maintaining his stern demeanor. I want everyone here to understand this. The FAA will never tolerate any form of discrimination or bias within the aviation industry. Those of us in this field must recognize that our responsibility is to ensure safety and fairness for all passengers and staff. I do not wish to witness any further incidents like this in the future. He then turned to the FAA staff accompanying him, gently issuing an order. I request an immediate and thorough investigation into Captain Whitman's actions today, including her handling of security and her conduct towards Elijah. We need to clarify and resolve this matter completely. The FAA agent immediately nodded in agreement, while Whitman stood frozen, her head bowed low, completely powerless in the face of the current situation. She knew all too well that her career future at Horizon Airlines and within the aviation industry was now at significant risk. Elijah, standing beside his father, felt his heart finally begin to calm. The strength and fairness his father had just displayed helped him understand more clearly than ever the true value of courage, the conviction in justice, and the importance of standing firm against wrongdoing. This moment served as a valuable lesson for everyone present, demonstrating that true power resides not in position or rank, but in fairness, integrity, and self-respect. Elijah felt prouder of his father than ever before and promised himself that no matter his future circumstances, he would always uphold the dignity and courage his father had taught and protected today. While the room remained heavy with a tense silence following Mr. David Jackson's stern questioning, one of the senior FAA officials quickly opened the tablet in his hands, approached him, and whispered something. Mr. Jackson listened intently, then gave a subtle nod of agreement, his gaze never leaving Captain Whitman, who was now almost crumbling under the immense psychological pressure bearing down on her shoulders. Immediately, the FAA official stepped forward, his voice clear and decisive, breaking the suffocating silence. Mr. Jackson, everyone, we have just conducted a thorough review of the security camera footage in the pilot rest area, and we have gathered some very clear and objective evidence pertaining to the incident that just occurred. As he spoke, he connected the tablet to the large screen in the break room, and a video began to play. It clearly showed Elijah entering the pilot's break room accompanied by Tanya Reynolds from the HR department. In the video, Miss Reynolds personally handed Elijah a special access card, indicated the designated seating area, and then promptly departed to attend to her duties. The entire process adhered strictly to protocol, appearing clear and transparent. The video continued, showing Elijah sitting quietly in his chair, exhibiting no suspicious behavior. The boy was focused on the documentary playing on the TV screen, not even leaving his seat. It was only when Captain Whitman entered and began questioning him aggressively and without substantiation that Elijah stood up, attempting to explain the situation. When the video concluded, the room erupted with murmurs of disbelief. All eyes turned towards Whitman, filled with reproach and disappointment for the serious error she had just committed. Whitman stood frozen, her face flushing with shame and helplessness, knowing there was no way to justify her actions any longer. The FAA official did not stop there. He continued, his tone now more serious, clearly aiming to clarify the entire situation. We have also examined Captain Whitman's work record in both the FAA's and Horizon Airlines' internal systems. The findings of this investigation are deeply disappointing and concerning, as this is not the first instance of Miss Whitman engaging in such behavior. Everyone's gaze became sharper, focusing entirely on the man delivering this shocking information. Whitman trembled, her face turning pale as she realized the truth she had attempted to conceal was now being exposed before everyone. Over the past 3 years, we have documented at least 3 official complaints regarding discriminatory behavior from Captain Whitman towards employees and customers of color. Specifically, the complaints clearly indicate that Miss Whitman repeatedly made unfounded accusations and assumptions based on personal bias, causing significant harm to the reputation and dignity of innocent individuals she targeted. These words struck like bullets aimed directly at the career and reputation Whitman had worked so assiduously to build. The room grew louder, whispers and gossip rapidly spreading, and Whitman felt every eye piercing into her, as if searching her soul and moral integrity. At this moment, Elijah stood silently beside his father, feeling both relieved that the truth had come to light and saddened by the cruelty that prejudice could inflict upon others. He glanced at his father, David Jackson, still standing there, his face stern but his eyes calm and just. It was his father who had brought forth justice, not only for Elijah, but for all the victims who had suffered unjust treatment in the past. Whitman, unable to withstand the pressure any longer, weakly attempted to speak, pleading for sympathy from Mr. Jackson and the witnesses present. "I am truly sorry. I never intended to hurt anyone. I was simply too worried about safety. Please, give me a chance." Mr. Jackson immediately cut her off, his voice still cold but reasoned. "Captain Whitman, this is not the first time you have caused such an incident. I believe everyone deserves forgiveness when they make a mistake, but forgiveness is only for those who acknowledge their errors and genuinely change. What you have demonstrated here only further proves the severe ethical issues and deep-seated bias in your behavior. The aviation industry absolutely cannot tolerate such continuing actions." He paused for a moment, his gaze stern as he scanned the room, delivering this crucial message to everyone present. "I want all of you here to understand that prejudice and discrimination have no place in aviation, nor in any other profession. This is a great lesson, not just for Captain Whitman, but for all of us, about the true values of fairness, dignity, and mutual respect." Elijah felt prouder than ever of his father, the man who had bravely stood up for what was right. He knew that from this moment forward, he would never forget this moment. The moment when the truth had been laid bare for all to see, following Mr. David Jackson's final words, imbued with authority and determination, echoing in the room. The space once again fell into a heavy silence. But this time, it was not the silence of doubt or fear. Here, it was the silence of anticipation and longing for a fair and clear decision. While the room remained heavy with the tense silence stemming from Mr. David Jackson's stern questioning, one of the senior FAA officials quickly opened the tablet in his hands, approached him, and whispered something. Mr. Jackson listened intently, then gave a subtle nod of agreement, his gaze never leaving Captain Whitman, who was now almost crumbling under the immense psychological pressure bearing down on her shoulders. Immediately, the FAA official stepped forward, his voice clear and decisive, breaking the suffocating silence. "Mr. Jackson, everyone, we have just conducted a thorough review of the security camera footage in the pilot rest area, and we've gathered some very clear and objective evidence related to the incident that just occurred." As he spoke, he connected the tablet to the large screen in the break room, and a video began to play, clearly showing Elijah entering the pilot's break room accompanied by Tanya Reynolds from the HR department. In the video, Miss Reynolds personally handed Elijah a special access card, pointed out the designated seating area, and then quickly left to attend to her work. The entire process followed protocol, clear and transparent. The video continued, showing Elijah sitting quietly in the chair, doing nothing suspicious. The boy was focused on the documentary playing on the TV screen, not even leaving his seat. It was only when Captain Whitman entered and began questioning him roughly and without basis that Elijah stood up, attempting to explain the situation. When the video concluded, the room erupted with murmurs of disbelief. All eyes turned toward Whitman, filled with reproach and disappointment for the serious wrong she had just committed. Whitman stood frozen, her face flushing with shame and helplessness, knowing there was no way to justify her actions anymore. The FAA official didn't stop there. He continued, his tone now more serious, clearly aiming to clarify the entire situation. We've also checked Captain Whitman's work record in both the FAA's and Horizon Airline's internal systems. The results of this investigation are deeply disappointing and concerning, as this is not the first time Miss Whitman has engaged in such behavior. Everyone's gaze became sharper, focusing entirely on the man delivering this shocking information. Whitman trembled, her face turning pale as she realized the truth she had tried to hide was now being exposed in front of everyone. Over the past 3 years, we've documented at least 3 official complaints regarding discriminatory behavior from Captain Whitman toward employees and customers of color, specifically. The complaints clearly show that Miss Whitman repeatedly made unfounded accusations and assumptions based on personal bias, causing significant harm to the reputation and dignity of innocent individuals she targeted. These words hit like bullets, aimed directly at the career and reputation Whitman had worked so hard to build. The room grew louder, whispers and gossip quickly spreading, and Whitman felt every eye piercing into her as if searching her soul and moral integrity. At this moment, Elijah stood silently beside his father, feeling both relieved that the truth had come to light and saddened by the cruelty that prejudice could inflict on others. He glanced at his father, David Jackson, still standing there, his face stern but his eyes calm and just. It was his father who had brought justice, not just for Elijah, but for all the victims who had suffered unjust treatment in the past. Whitman, unable to bear the pressure any longer, weakly attempted to speak, pleading for sympathy from Mr. Jackson and the witnesses present. "I'm truly sorry. I never intended to hurt anyone. I was just too worried about safety. Please, give me a chance." Mr. Jackson immediately cut her off, his voice still cold but reasoned. "Captain Whitman, this is not the first time you've caused such an incident. I believe everyone deserves forgiveness when they make a mistake, but forgiveness is only for those who acknowledge their errors and genuinely change. What you've shown here only further proves the severe ethical issues and deep-seated bias in your behavior. The aviation industry absolutely cannot tolerate such continuing actions." He paused for a moment, his gaze stern as he scanned the room, delivering this crucial message to everyone. "I want all of you here to understand that prejudice and discrimination have no place in aviation, nor in any other profession. This is a great lesson, not just for Captain Whitman, but for all of us, about the true values of fairness, dignity, and mutual respect." Elijah felt prouder than ever of his father, the man who had bravely stood up for what was right. He knew that from this moment on, he would never forget this moment, the moment when the truth had been laid bare for everyone to see. After Mr. David Jackson's final words, full of authority and determination, echoed in the room, the space once again fell into heavy silence. But this time, it wasn't the silence of doubt or fear. Here, it was the silence of waiting and longing for a fair and clear decision. David Jackson surveyed the assembly, his gaze settling pointedly on Captain Whitman's mortified countenance, a silent confirmation that her transgressions would not go unaddressed. His voice, resonating with assured conviction, then cut through the palpable tension. As the administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, I am hereby immediately suspending Captain Rebecca Whitman from all duty. I am also requesting that the FAA collaborate closely with Horizon Airlines to undertake a thorough examination of her professional conduct, her capacity for assessing flight safety, and all of her recent professional activities. Until this investigation concludes, Captain Whitman is prohibited from performing any flight duties, and all her authority is temporarily revoked, effective immediately. Each pronouncement from Jackson landed like a decisive blow upon Whitman's career and pride. The woman, once radiating authority and arrogance, now stood rigidly, her complexion shifting from pallor to a flush of crimson shame and despair. She attempted to articulate, perhaps to offer an explanation or plead for leniency, but her words caught, choked in her throat, unable to escape. At that precise moment, 2 uniformed airport security personnel approached, their expressions grave. Acting decisively on the directives just issued, they flanked Whitman. "Captain Whitman, please accompany us immediately," they stated tonelessly. Whitman lifted her head, her eyes conveying a desperate plea, but every individual present either averted their gaze or regarded her with evident disappointment and disdain. None of her former colleagues, those who once held her in respect and admiration, stepped forward to offer defense or sympathy. Elijah stood quietly by his father's side, his heart a complex landscape of emotions. On one hand, he felt a sense of relief, knowing that justice was being served, the truth finally brought to light, and he would no longer endure unjust humiliation. Yet, on the other, a pang of sorrow resonated as he witnessed someone bear the painful public consequence of their grave errors. He grasped now, with a clarity that was both illuminating and sobering, the profound lesson about the unpredictable repercussions of prejudice and arrogance. A lesson his father had imparted countless times, but which had only now truly imprinted itself upon his understanding. Whitman finally comprehended that there was no path back. She lowered her head, walking silently between the 2 security officers, each step feeling as if she were burdened by an immense weight. As she passed the pilot's lounge, an absolute hush fell over the room, every eye tracking her every mortified movement. It was a moment etched in memory, a stark testament to how swiftly authority could evaporate when not wielded with integrity and fairness. Once Whitman's form had vanished through the doorway, Mr. Jackson calmly addressed the FAA officials and airline leadership, issuing further instructions with efficiency and professionalism. "I expect the FAA and Horizon Airlines to cooperate closely to ensure this investigation is conducted with the utmost fairness and transparency. We must clearly ascertain the accountability of every individual involved, while also reviewing all airport security and training protocols to guarantee that no similar incidents recur in the future." The FAA officials and airline representatives nodded solemnly, promptly commencing the implementation of Mr. Jackson's directives. Elijah looked at his father, his heart swelling with profound pride, not solely for his father's dignity and decisiveness, but for the compassion and unwavering commitment to righteousness that his father consistently demonstrated through his actions. Mr. Jackson turned to Elijah, his stern demeanor softening as he met his beloved son's gaze. He gently placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder and spoke in a warm, comforting tone. "Elijah, I am immensely proud of you, not only for standing firm in such a challenging circumstance, but also for maintaining the resilience and dignity I always hoped you would possess. This will be a significant lesson in your life, and I am confident that from this point forward you will face any challenge with even greater fortitude." Elijah nodded slightly, his heart brimming with gratitude and emotions too profound for immediate articulation. He understood that from this day forward, his narrative would transcend a mere unjust accusation and unfairness. It would stand as irrefutable proof of righteousness triumphing over prejudice and tyranny. In that moment, within the very room that had just borne witness to a dramatic shift in power and justice, Elijah grasped the truth that while justice may sometimes be delayed, it would invariably prevail. From this juncture, his path lay in steadfastly continuing along his challenging journey, with his father as his unwavering guide and companion. As Whitman's receding footsteps gradually faded from the pilot lounge doorway, the prevailing tension in the air slowly dissipated with them. Elijah remained by his father's side, his spirit considerably lighter, though the echoes of the insult he had endured lingered. Noticing the subtle concern still etched in his son's eyes, Mr. Jackson gently tightened his grip on Elijah's hand, conveying warmth and profound reassurance. "Elijah, remember this. A person's true worth is measured by how they confront adversity, not by the judgments of others. I know how incredibly strong you have been today, and I am prouder of you than ever." Elijah looked up at his father, recognizing the unshakable confidence and love reflected in his father's deep, affectionate gaze. His father's simple yet powerful words felt like a cool stream, washing away the pain inflicted by prejudice. Gradually, belief in himself and his future began to rekindle within his heart, straightening his posture and imbuing his expression with newfound calmness and resolve. At that juncture, from among the assembled pilots, a figure emerged with an air of confident approachability. It was Captain Amara Johnson, a black female aviator with over 2 decades of flight experience, recognized not only for her exceptional skills, but also for her inherent kindness and her advocacy for racial equality within aviation. She approached Elijah with a warm, genuine smile, radiating empathy and encouragement. "Elijah, I am Captain Amara Johnson. I am truly sorry for what you have just endured, but I want you to know that the aviation industry is always welcoming to individuals like you, young, passionate, talented, and courageous. I would be delighted to invite you to experience the cockpit of the aircraft I'm about to pilot, so you can firsthand appreciate the environment where I believe you truly belong." Captain Johnson's heartfelt invitation instantly illuminated Elijah's eyes with excitement. He glanced towards his father for permission, receiving a gentle yet significant nod from Mr. Jackson. That moment seemed to infuse Elijah with renewed strength, enabling him to cast aside his earlier anxieties and proceed with an open heart. As they departed the pilot lounge with Captain Johnson, Elijah could distinctly perceive the shift in the gazes and attitudes of those around them. No longer were there doubts or scrutinizing glances. Instead, there were only warm, encouraging looks, and even sincere apologies from other airport personnel and pilots. Elijah understood that justice was not merely about penalizing those who had wronged him, but also about restoring honor and dignity to the victim in a fair and unequivocal manner. Along the expansive airport corridor, Elijah and Captain Johnson conversed as they walked. She shared invaluable insights from her flying career, including the formidable challenges she encountered upon entering aviation, particularly the persistent prejudices that, at times, nearly led her to abandon her aspirations. "Elijah, I have experienced moments akin to yours today. I felt the profound sting of being doubted and judged solely due to the color of my skin and my background. However, I came to realize that the most effective way to overcome prejudice is not through anger or resentment, but by demonstrating that we not only merit our place, but can excel far beyond what they might imagine." Her words resonated deeply within Elijah's soul, heightening his awareness of the path ahead. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for Captain Johnson's presence at such a pivotal juncture, not only for the trust and hope she had instilled in him, but also for being a living embodiment of strength and courage in the face of prejudice and adversity. Finally, they paused before the entrance to the cockpit of the Boeing 787. The aircraft Captain Johnson was scheduled to pilot on her upcoming flight. The cockpit door swung open, revealing a mesmerizing array of illuminated control panels, buttons, screens, and an intricate yet fascinating system. Elijah's heart raced, filled with a potent mixture of excitement and deep emotion. Captain Johnson smiled at the young boy, gently placing a hand on his shoulder, and spoke with a firm, reassuring voice. "This, is the place where I believe you will stand in the not-too-distant future. Elijah, do not permit anyone or anything to make you doubt your capabilities or your rightful place. The sky is always vast enough to embrace those brave enough to step forward." Elijah met her gaze, a powerful surge of emotion rising within him. He understood that this was a precious moment, one that unequivocally restored his faith in the future he had always envisioned in his heart. There was no longer any space for fear or doubt, only a profound conviction that he truly belonged here, in the boundless and challenging expanse of the sky above. And at that very instant, as Elijah stepped into the cockpit, he knew that his life was about to embark on an entirely new chapter, where honor, hope, and the dream of soaring unhindered through the skies would forever be cherished, protected, and realized through all his earnest efforts and courage. Following that unforgettable moment when Elijah took his inaugural step into the cockpit of the Boeing 787 alongside Captain Amara Johnson, the young boy's narrative seemed to blossom into an entirely new chapter. Elijah was no longer merely a teenager navigating a personal challenge. He had transformed into a living emblem of fairness, bravery, and the optimistic future that the aviation industry was diligently striving towards. As for David Jackson, in the aftermath of the tumultuous events that had unfolded, he profoundly recognized that prejudice and racism persisted as an insidious undercurrent within the aviation industry and society at large. In his capacity as the FAA administrator, he resolved to enact bold and decisive measures, initiating a comprehensive campaign aimed at fostering greater diversity within the aviation workforce, with a particular emphasis on eradicating all manifestations of racial, gender, or class-based prejudice. Within mere weeks, the FAA unveiled a series of innovative programs targeting youth across the nation, designed to cultivate equitable and transparent opportunities for young individuals aspiring to join the industry. These initiatives not only granted access to state-of-the-art education and training, but also prioritized raising awareness regarding equal rights, diversity, and the spirit of solidarity. The fundamental message conveyed by Jackson was unequivocal and forceful. Everyone, irrespective of their background, deserves the chance to soar as high and as far as their aspirations can carry them. Concurrently, Elijah, who had once endured profound injustice, had now ascended to the role of a prominent youth ambassador for the FAA. He was extended invitations to numerous schools, workshops, and community gatherings to recount his personal journey, disseminating the empowering message that no individual should be compelled to endure fear or injustice due to their race or background while pursuing their aspirations. Each time he addressed the eager, hopeful faces of young people, Elijah no longer harbored the hesitation or anxiety he once felt. He confidently narrated his experiences, recounting the pain and despair of facing prejudice and discrimination, culminating in the moment when justice was powerfully and clearly upheld, thanks to the timely intervention of his father and the FAA. Elijah emphasized that while life may present instances where injustice and prejudice can momentarily shake one's faith, ultimately, truth and justice will always prevail if one possesses the courage to confront and contend with them. Elijah realized that he had transcended the role of a mere storyteller. He had become a source of inspiration and motivation for young individuals like himself, those who might have previously harbored fears that their background, familial circumstances, or skin color would impede their dreams. He invariably concluded his addresses with a simple yet impactful declaration. Never forget that the aviation industry, or any profession for that matter, needs individuals like you. Diversity is a source of strength, and every dream warrants protection. I stand here today to affirm that the future is perpetually open to those courageous enough to step forward and pursue their convictions. Elijah's heartfelt pronouncements were consistently met with enthusiastic applause, rapturous gazes, and even tearful moments of profound emotion from his listeners. In this manner, Elijah's story evolved beyond his individual experience to become a collective narrative, inspiring countless young people to surmount their limitations and fears, thereby reaching for even greater aspirations. Regarding Captain Whitman, following a comprehensive and transparent inquiry conducted by the FAA, she was compelled to confront severe repercussions for her egregious actions. Although undeniably painful, this outcome was imperative to unequivocally convey that no individual possesses the right to leverage their authority to inflict harm upon others based on personal prejudice. Whitman's forfeiture of her position and authority served as a vivid demonstration of justice's potency, illustrating that no one stands above the law or the tenets of professional ethics. Thanks to Jackson's decisive and swift actions, this narrative did not conclude as an isolated incident, but rather marked a pivotal turning point, catalyzing significant and positive transformations throughout the entire aviation industry. Airports and airlines across the United States commenced the rigorous review of all their operational procedures, providing employees with extensive training on social awareness and cultural diversity with unprecedented thoroughness. Through this entire dramatic and intense experience, everyone present recognized the perilous influence of prejudice, but also felt the immense power and potential for positive change that justice and social responsibility can engender. The shift in the central figure from a maternal CEO to a paternal FAA administrator lent an unprecedented degree of potency, clarity, and directness to the enforcement of justice. This facilitated the delivery of a profound and incisive message. Every dream deserves protection, and no one should be compelled to bear the burden of fear due to distinctions in skin color, social standing, or familial background. For Elijah, every forward step in his life was now undertaken not only for his own advancement, but also to persistently propagate these fundamental human values, assisting society in its progression towards a future where every individual is accorded the dignity, respect, and fairness they rightfully deserve. Through Elijah Jackson's deeply moving and dramatic story, we observe the devastating consequences that prejudice can inflict, but we also bear witness to the extraordinary strength of justice and social responsibility when they are implemented with unwavering firmness and absolute clarity. No individual should be subjected to injustice or forced to relinquish their dreams due to their skin color, social status, or background. And what about you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination stemming from prejudice? Share your story or thoughts in the comments section so that we can collectively disseminate the message of equality and fairness. If you found this video insightful, please show your appreciation with a like, share it with your friends, and remember to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring narratives. Thank you for listening. We look forward to seeing you in our next video.